Welcome to Beneath the Headlines. My name is Mike Woodruff, and each month I have an opportunity to have a conversation with an author or thought leader about some of the more pressing topics of the day, ideas that are shaping our lives. Beneath the Headlines is a production of the Lakelight Institute. So I just finished up a conversation with Andy Hanauer. Andy is the president and CEO of the One America movement, which is a national organization founded to help faith leaders confront toxic polarization and help faith communities build a stronger moral vision for public life. Andy has a BA from Dartmouth and an MA in International Studies from the University of San Francisco. Before leading One America, he served with Repair the World and with Jubilee USA. So he's got a history of work in the not-for-profit space and in sort of the helping create thriving community space as well. Under his leadership, One America has grown rapidly and now works with thousands of faith leaders across the country to bridge political, racial, and religious divides. He has written for or been written about in USA Today, The Washington Post, NPR, and other publications. And he has spoken at the United Nations, the National Press Club, and congressional briefings. He was in Chicago doing some groundwork for a conference that's going to be held here later this month. And a friend of ours, a mutual friend for Andy and myself, called and said, you guys should get together. So, yes, you picked up, this conversation picks up pretty closely, pretty soon after we met. But interesting conversation about the work that he's doing, and it's hard work. Peacemaking is hard work. And I appreciated very much the insights that he brings to trying to combat the toxic polarization that is around us at this moment. And I think you'll enjoy the conversation. Andy, welcome to the conversation. Glad to have you here. Let's get at it. What do you mean by polarization? I think I know, but we probably should make sure that we are using the term in the same way. And I hear, when I've looked at your stuff and been on your websites and other podcasts, you get associated with toxic polarization. So I know that you don't think it's wrong to disagree. So what constitutes polarization or toxic polarization, and is there daylight between those two?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. When we started this work and we started talking about toxic polarization, people would say, what do you do? I'd say, well, I work for an organization that's trying to stop toxic polarization. And they would say, what is that? And then after a few years, no one really worried. Yeah, no, everyone knows now. We would say that what makes polarization toxic, as you said, it's not about disagreeing. A country with no polarization, well, that's North Korea, right? That's not what we want. But what makes polarization toxic is when it stops being I disagree with you and starts being I don't like who you are. You're on a team that I don't associate with, and therefore you have to be stopped at all costs. And ultimately, what we would say is if you believe that someone's on a team that must be stopped at all costs, there's going to become almost no limit to what you can justify doing to that person. So we are trying to prevent the kind of polarization that turns us into enemies, turns our neighbors into enemies, and pits us against each other in ways that say only one of us can really live in this country.
So success looks like peace?
Depends how you define peace, right? So I think that's the question. And I think we would say we're looking to support faith leaders to build peacemaking congregations and communities. And peace, at least for me as a Christian, my conception of peace is the search for both truth and reconciliation. Right? It is, I want to pursue the truth. I'm not going to water down the truth. And I see the image of God in my opponent, in my neighbor. And I do not accept that they are beyond reconciliation with me or with God.
Okay, so a lot there to jump into. Let's back up and get a running start. So,
Sure.
How did you get into this work? You graduate. You grew up in a secular Jewish home. You graduate from Dartmouth, where you become a Christian, and you've got some experience working in sort of the not-for-profit space. How did you end up on this podcast, Andy? Why is it that you're here?
I was wandering through Chicago and I found you.
Yeah.
Well, as you mentioned, I grew up in a secular Jewish home. I had no religion growing up, not Judaism either, and very unexpectedly found Jesus in college. I'm from California. My wife is from Arkansas. And so as the country started to tear itself apart, you can imagine that.
So what year are we talking about?
I would say 2014 marked a significant shift, and I think social media had a lot.
Okay.
Especially.
Everyone is blaming social media and the advent of the iPhone and the like button and all those things. Yes, we went downhill.
They are bad, and I will also say, my roommate in college who helped convert me to Christianity, he used to say that alcohol or getting drunk doesn't change you; it reveals things. And I think the same is true here, right? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, they have caused a lot of problems, but I also think we have to look in the mirror and ask, how have they revealed things that were already in us? So I had a family from the South, from the West Coast, Jewish, atheist, Christian, Republican, Democrat, and I just looked out and I remember something that Arthur Brooks said, which is, no matter who you hate in our society, it's probably someone that I love. And that became very true to me as the country started to get very divided. And so I wanted to be part of something different.
So you did what? Lots of us have had the experience of realizing that the temperature has dropped around the Thanksgiving table, or you're hoping that somebody doesn't say X because you're like, okay, I'm going to have to change the subject or figure out whether or not we can, get the small kids out of the room so that we can have this conversation. But we don't start organizations. You did.
Well, I was looking for a job at the time, so it was good timing. But I had
most people go to Starbucks and apply, Andy. They don't say, "Let me figure out how I can spend the rest of my life raising money for an organization."
Yeah, well, I think I probably didn't have a full understanding of how much that was going to entail. I honestly, I say this truthfully. I felt called to it, and I felt my faith calling me to it. I have lots of political opinions, just like you, just like anyone listening to this. But what I felt most deeply wasn't any particular opinion. It was the idea that our politics and the divisiveness was not in keeping with what I feel I'm called to do when I'm called to follow Jesus. And so I wanted to be part of something that was different and that more closely aligned with my faith. What started it was the idea that I knew a lot of interfaith work was unattractive to Christians who don't want to water down their beliefs when they show up. And I thought, well, what if we did something that got people together who are different but didn't ask them to water down their beliefs?
Yeah, I think we had a conversation. Well, when we had a conversation by phone, and I just so everybody knows, we've spent 20 minutes together so far. Had a brief phone call. We have a mutual friend who said that Mike, Andy's coming to Chicago. You should get together. You should go to his thing. And I'm not going to your thing. You have an event in Chicago. We're filming this or recording this on a Wednesday, and you have something coming up later this month, right?
Correct,
and
yes.
you're doing some advanced work on that, and that is gathering faith leaders from Jewish, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, maybe people of no faith at all, gathering them together in Chicago for a couple days to go after big topics. Is that?
Yes, to basically support each other to be peacemakers, to have hard conversations with each other, and also to hear from experts on topics that are making it difficult for them to be peacemakers
Okay, so you're taunting me. I want to jump to these topics and start to get under the hood. But I want just a little bit more foundational background work. So you decide that you're going to try and help congregations, and I'm assuming that this would mean synagogues and churches and mosques and whatever. You're going to try and equip faith leaders to be involved in creating environments in which their people are going to be more likely to get along with other people?
Well, when we first started, we were just saying, how do we get people to spend time together and do something together that they believe in? So it was a lot of it was service projects. So the idea was, I might disagree with you about the nature of God and the universe. We might disagree about politics, but can we turn the temperature down a little bit by working together to help the homeless, to help people who are trying to find jobs, whatever it is? And then can we have conversations about what we disagree about without, cancel culture, without telling people to water down their beliefs? That's how it started. I think over time, what we heard from a lot of faith leaders, a lot of pastors, was that sounds nice. Sounds like a good thing to do. But the thing that keeps me up at night is my church is deeply divided. Is my church is purple and I can't hold them together. Or my church has become an echo chamber and only one side of the political aisle is welcome. And I don't think this is consistent with how I want to lead as a pastor. So our work became about how do we help faith leaders, support them to be peacemakers within their faith.
And your website says that you are faith-rooted and science-backed. Talk about each of those for just a second.
Sure, although our website is changing, so that's kind of a relic of older times. One of the things that we used to do was we would take the science of toxic polarization and we would translate it from the scientists to faith language. So we would be taking what neuroscientists were saying about what's going on in our brains when we're arguing with our uncle at Thanksgiving or our niece, and how do we understand that? And we were giving presentations to faith leaders who were really interested in that question because they're seeing it every day in their congregations. But we were translating the science into what does Scripture say? What does our faith teach us? So that was kind of a quirk of our early work, but it is just a way that we help faith leaders kind of understand the world around them.
Okay, so I would say, so there definitely is, I sense the toxic polarization. There's actually less in my day-to-day life today than there was in 2020.
Yes.
And I think that's in part because 2020 it's COVID, it's a contested election. It's quickly it becomes George Floyd. There's a whole bunch of things that are happening, and we ended up in the next couple years losing a vocal. We lost some people on that had more dark opinions, and by dark I mean dark red or dark blue. We didn't lose everybody, and I wasn't trying to lose anybody, but I would just say when the 2024 election came up, I was like, oh, this is not as difficult as it was 4 years ago. But I would say that's mostly because most people were so weary of it. They just didn't want to say anything. And so you just didn't have people engaging with that. So, which is not, that's not the peace that we're after. That's not shalom. That's not, that's not a world in which everybody's thriving, but it's more of what I feel and more of what I have seen. I feel like people are weary and they're almost less likely to come out at night. It's like, I'm teaching a class, as I mentioned, it's tonight, and we had to cut it off. So yeah, we got people coming out at night. It's not that nobody does, but I generally feel like lots of people are just wanting to just be left alone. Yeah. They want to go home and they want to be left alone.
You're 100% right. So what you're describing, I think, is a much bigger trend. I would say, like, if you think about what it was like to pastor a church in 2013 and then what you went through in 2020, I think you could say that a lot of pastors were just blindsided by the sheer velocity of it, by just how difficult it was and how thorny it was. And I think that a lot of people over the last 4 or 5 years have been burned out by it. Toxic polarization is a perpetual conflict, is unsustainable, right? So the people yelling at us on cable news and talk radio, the internet, they do it nonstop because they're making a lot of money off of it. But for most human beings, what you experienced in 2020, maybe someone can do that for a year, but then they get pretty tired of it. And they want to watch sports. They want to go back to their job. They want to not hate their grandmother or their grandkids. So this is the opportunity I see for the church.
Okay, so I guess two different two questions that take us in two directions. First of all, let me say, in 2020, maybe it was later than that. It was after George Floyd, so it was not long after George Floyd. I invited 8 people. I invited 2 African Americans, 2 Asian Americans, 2 Hispanic Americans, 2 Anglo Americans, all attending Christ Church, to 4 dinners that I was hosting. And I said, these are 3-hour dinners. We're going to talk about race. This will be a civil but a contentious conversation. That's what I'm inviting you into. And we ended up meeting, I think, 6 or 7 times, and we had long conversations. And there was, I think, there was more honesty. I'm not going to say everybody was completely honest, but there was more honesty. But we did not, and I prefaced all this by saying, look, the country is having a big moment. I represent what some would say is a very insulated position. I'm a white male with power and money and a lot of education, and so I don't get it. And so I want to hear. I want to hear. I don't have an agenda for this other than I just want to listen to this conversation take place. So we met again 6 times for, they were long dinners, and it was again, everybody was civil, and we had long conversations. We did not reach agreement on much of anything, and it was really sort of discouraging to me to go, wow, this is like the Venn diagram doesn't have a lot of overlap here, and that's it's harder than I thought. So I guess I want to ask, so if I was in a group, if I had gone through your training, Andy, would I have done a better job?
I hope so. I don't think that the things that people tried to do in 2020, I think a lot of them failed because the environment was profoundly difficult, right? I mean, if you think about almost anything, you don't want to only do it when there's a catastrophe or an emergency, right? It's the muscle that you build every day. I think about peacemaking or racial reconciliation, anything like that, as an orientation, like a heart orientation that comes from my faith. And so you're living that out every day. And then in the moment that you were trying, I think, very courageously to address that, you were dealing with people who are being inundated by the news, inundated by the moment that we were in. And I think a lot of efforts failed. We work with a lot of faith leaders who have been through failed efforts to reconcile or what have you. And it sets people back because then it feels that much harder to get back to the table. But I think that I think there's things that you learn from those efforts, and I think it's not for nothing, right? But I think that there has to be a question of like, what are we doing in the times when things feel quieter, and not just what are we doing when the news gets bleak.
Okay, so what would you have? So I set this up as discussions around a meal with arguably too many different people in the room, perhaps. How would you have coached me differently?
Well, I don't know all the dynamics of your church or those relationships. I'll tell you what one pastor did that worked really well. He's a pastor of a mostly white church in Virginia, and what he did was he started with the question, what is the obstacle here? And for him, the obstacle was, if he wanted to talk about race, he knew a percentage of his church was going to assume that this was going to be something where they would be shamed or feel guilty or blamed, and that they would just walk out and not participate. And so he said, how do we make sure that those people participate? Because if their voices aren't in the room, we're not getting the whole picture. And so he brought everyone together and he said, we're going to start this process with prayer. We're going to ask what the Bible says to us about how do you have hard conversations more generally, not just about race in 21st century America. And then we're going to set a norm, which is nobody's getting canceled. So everyone stays at the table and that's the win. And then we work through everything together as Christians. And it worked pretty well. And maybe that wouldn't have worked in your church. Like it's hard.
That's not that different from where we started, and perhaps we had and have greater peace, but I would say that I don't. I mean, part of this goes to the whole question of what does it mean to be an American? What kind of pluralistic project do we have in place now? What does it look like? How do people with very different starting assumptions about life and family and law and other things, how do we figure out how to do this? So I might have had too high of expectations. And look, I've been watching reconciliation efforts for 40 years, and I have numerous friends in the Middle East, and was involved in helping to fund a guy to his doctoral studies at Oxford on reconciliation, and he's Palestinian, and a Palestinian Christian. And he looked at the identity of a minority within a minority within a minority. So he was a Palestinian in Israel, but he was a Christian Palestinian in Israel. And so that was his doctoral study. But he spent the last 35 years, he just turned his ministry over to one of his boys, because he's got to be close to 70. But, the work in the Middle East between Palestinians and Jews, Christians, Muslims, and I've been there. I've stayed in the West Bank. I've stayed in Jerusalem. I've had Arab tour guides, Jewish tour guides, Palestinian tour guides, and I am very aware. So I've been watching this, and obviously, there's not a lot of reconciliation that has happened. Do you have hope? Well, let me ask this: are you optimistic? I mean, I know you described yourself as a Christian, so we are required to have hope. Are you optimistic?
Yeah, I am. You said a little while ago that things were worse 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think they absolutely were. There's something inside us that is designed for reconciliation by God. And it is hard. It's really hard. But we're not meant to live in June 2020 for all of our lives, right?
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna go with that. I guess I want to peel back something here. So, are you a facilitator whose primary goal is peace in the room, or are you an advocate for a particular position that holds people together? So, and let me just go real world here. So there are religious ideologies, extreme. I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about moderate positions. So I guess I can't hide this. I'll just say. So there are many moderate Muslims. There is a branch of radical Islam that is very anti-free speech, anti-freedom of religion. We're going to establish Sharia law. So these conversations take place on the news, on the podcasts, okay, we're going to have, this is the agenda. And lots of Americans and or Christians are very alarmed by this. So let's imagine, so would you say, okay, the One America movement, I'm leading a ministry, I'm leading a group that is trying to find ways for us to get along? Is that the highest good? Would you say, this is the One America Project, freedom of speech is a non-negotiable? I'm just trying to understand how you understand the nature of your work.
Yeah. So I would say movement's just like we're going to update our website, I promise. Movement's a bad word. I think the word that describes what we're doing is network. We're a network of faith leaders who are pursuing religious conceptions of peace. And as I alluded to earlier, that means you're pursuing not just, oh, why can't we all just get along? You're this, I'm that, but we're both, we both like the Cubs, so let's just be friends. That's better than shooting each other, but that's a low bar. We are thinking about peace as the pursuit of truth and the pursuit of love and reconciliation simultaneously, which is, for me as a Christian, is how I see Jesus talking about peacemaking in Matthew. So for a faith leader to be part of our network, by definition, if they believe that it's okay to commit violence against other religions, they're not going to be part of our network. If they don't believe in free speech, then what we're trying to do is not possible. It's not consistent. So there's a certain, self-selection there where folks who feel that way probably aren't going to be involved in our work. But I think there's a lot of shades, right? Not everyone is either an extremist or, going to every multi-faith picnic, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who have very strong views and understandably don't want to water down those views or be in a group where they feel like their views are going to be trod upon. And so a lot of our work is within groups. It's Muslims talking to Muslims or Christians talking to Christians about how to live out that peacemaking in a pluralistic society where you're going to be surrounded by people who don't agree with you. So that's more what our work is about, and less about how do we get these people in a room to like each other or hate each other less.
Okay, so freedom of America's sort of constitutional values of, First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, those are sort of assumed as you get into the conversation.
Yes.
Okay, and you said that you have seen the anger or the polarization turn down. Give me another success story to give me hope to keep working to sort of be a peacemaker.
Yeah. So there's a synagogue in Los Angeles that we work with, and they reached out to us and said, we know that for people like us, mostly Democrats in LA, Jewish, we have a perception of what evangelical Christians are. And we think we want to get out of our bubble. So can you introduce us to a church in they said, can you do it like a church in Iowa? And so I said, well, we got a great church in Nebraska, so that'll have to work for you. So the men's group of this synagogue began a relationship with a men's group from a evangelical church in Nebraska, and these guys met on Zoom for regularly for months and months. They asked hard questions. They debated politics and religion. They built relationships, and eventually the synagogue said, why don't you guys come out to LA for a weekend? So they came out. They went to the synagogue on a Friday. They toured the fire damage together. And then all of them went to a church on the Sunday. And one of the members of the synagogue said, when I go to a party now and someone starts talking about those people, and by that they mean Republicans, Christians, evangelicals, Midwesterners, he says, now when I hear that, I think those people are friends of mine. And it is so important that when we're surrounded by people who already agree with us, that we have the voices of people who are not like us somewhere in the back of our heads. I think that's a pretty sort of standard example of the kind of relationships we've built.
Okay, well, yeah. So, you can imagine the Midwestern Nebraskan evangelical in the flyover land going out to the Democratic Jewish Bel Air. Yeah. Okay. I'll take it. Do you make a distinction between peacemaking and peacekeeping?
Yeah, I think the first one's better. I think peacekeeping is about just, sort of the absence of violence, right? I think it's about trying, peacekeeping is what I do with my kids sometimes. I just want to get through the car ride and not have them screaming at each other. Peacemaking is the work of Jesus. It's the work of bringing people towards each other and towards God and the world. It's a lot harder, but it's a lot more meaningful.
Yeah, I'm remembering my friend, the Salim with a PhD from Oxford.
Yeah.
Initially, his work has changed a lot over the 35, 40 years. Initially, he would take 15 Palestinian. So you get 15 Palestinian school teachers or 15 Palestinian nurses or 15 Palestinian whatever, mothers. And then 15 Israeli teachers or, mothers. I mean, it would line up, right? I mean, we're going to try and get people who are roughly doing the same kind of thing. And they would go out into the desert with 15 camels. and they would pair up. So a Palestinian and an Israeli were on the same camel. And he said initially he had problems getting people to agree to come out to pick them up after a week. I think they were going to be out there because he said they were convinced we'd all be dead. But he said people were more scared of the camels than they were of each other, and they had to work together to hold us together.
Maybe that's our next program.
Well, they also were doing, the goal was then to agree on something to do together, some work project. We're gonna build a playground at this school in the West Bank, and we're gonna build a playground at this school in, some Israeli settlement. They would be doing similar kinds of things. But it's been very very challenging work. I've watched it, vicariously through him for the last 40 years, and I don't always agree with what he's doing, but I am challenged by the call to be a peacemaker.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think if you veer too far to one side, peacemaking becomes soft and it waters down truth. If you veer too far to the other side, we become tribal and we hate people and commit violence against them. So it's a narrow path, right? But that's what our faith calls us to, our narrow paths. I think there's just this incredible opportunity. We live in a culture where we're told that the highest good is to line up with a political team and hate people who aren't like us. And our God calls us to this incredible opportunity to see the world in a different way than that. So I view it as an incredible blessing to pursue that, and I never say that it's easy, because it's not.
Okay, well, so tell me just a little bit more about this project. I've got my final 4 questions, but we got another minute or two. Tell me a little bit about what you hope comes out of your Chicago conference, gathering, whatever you're calling it.
Yeah, well, so, as a network, one of the things that we're really focused on is how do we make sure faith leaders know that they are not alone in this work. And so faith leaders who come to our annual summit, they meet 250-ish other faith leaders who are going through some version of what they're going through to try to be peacemakers. So they'll meet people sometimes who are exactly like them in terms of faith or politics, but they live in a different part of the country. Or they might meet someone who's totally different from them, but they find unexpected similarities in some of the challenges that they're facing. Rabbi in Atlanta who says to me, no matter what I do, I feel like I'm always losing when it comes to this stuff. And I imagine a lot of pastors could resonate with that. So our goal is for a faith leader to walk away saying, I feel less alone in this work. And we tell them, if you're uncomfortable the entire time you're at our event, we failed. But if you're comfortable the entire time, we also failed. So we want to challenge people, hear views they don't agree with, listen to prayers from other faiths that they wouldn't otherwise hear, and have hard conversations with people they disagree with. Free speech, truth wins out. Everyone has a voice. That's the kind of environment we're trying to build.
Okay, well, Andy, I appreciate the work in the trenches that you're doing, and I am tired listening to it, but I'm gonna ask you here the final 4. So I'm just looking for quick, short, top of mind responses to these 4 questions I've asked. I think everybody I've interviewed on this podcast, anyway. So what, if anything, is keeping you up at night?
AI and what it's going to do to our children.
Okay. Well, the children angle is the common one. Almost everybody answers somehow related to children and AI. So yes, it's here. It's shocking. Its upsides are amazing. Its downsides are horrifying, and yeah. Well, I don't think it can do peacemaking, so you get to keep your job.
I hope so. I also know that one of the side effects of it is that I refuse to use GPS when I drive, and then I inevitably get lost and my kids get mad at me. But got to resist somehow. Okay.
What is on your nightstand?
A book, the Bible, and a lamp.
And what's the book?
The book is
other than the Bible
is disappointing. I'll be honest. So once in a while, my daughter will give me books to read that she's read, and usually they're fantastic because she's a brilliant writer and reader. But this time it's like a youth. It's called Divergent, and it was made into a movie, and it is too interesting to put down, but too terribly written to be excited about. So I'm stuck.
Okay.
Very awful.
I'm reading a graphic novel for the second time. I read one graphic novel and said, yeah, I'm not doing that again. And then I was given this book on the friendship between Tolkien and Lewis.
Oh, that's good.
And it's half graphic novel, half, and Lewis is represented as a lion, and Tolkien is represented as a wizard, and so it's pulling me through. But I always look and go, huh? I thought I gave up comics like this, but
That's a high intellectual comic. It's okay.
Yeah. Question 3: what book, product, podcast, Netflix series, Amazon purchase have you been raving about for the last couple years? You're most likely to, if somebody says whatever, oh, you got to buy this, or you got to watch this, or this podcast. Is there something that is you have recommended more than anything else?
Yeah, so I think it's a book called High Conflict by Amanda Ripley. She is a journalist, secular, and when she says high conflict, she means toxic polarization. In other words, the difference between conflict and high conflict. But she does a better job than anyone I've ever read at explaining it. And she talks about gangs in Chicago and people running for office in California and the whole world. What happens when we get stuck in a conflict and we feel like we can't get out of it. Good stuff.
Okay, last question. What are you working on next? Are you writing a book? Or you got a new project that you're rolling out with your organization? What's in the future?
Yeah, well, I'm not writing a book. I'm trying very hard to avoid writing a book. I'm succeeding so far, so wish me luck. It's funny, I joke sometimes that nonprofit world, you can make a sitcom about it and it would be pretty entertaining. One of the things that's really funny about the groups working to make the country less divided is that sometimes we can't get ourselves together and get unified. So one of the projects I'm working on is working to help a group of Christian peacemaking organizations work together better. And
okay,
it's an ongoing project.
Wow, that is discouraging in its own right, and a little surprising. When I was consulting many years ago, I was leading a day-long workshop for a company, and it was a marketing company. And at the end, I'm doing this Q&A, and they're asking me questions, and I'm like, wait, these are marketing questions? Aren't you supposed to have the answers to these questions? Like, what are you asking me for? I don't know anything about marketing. So, yeah, conflict resolution among peacemaking organizations. There's an unfortunate joke in there somewhere.
There absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
We can own that.
Well, I do wish you God's blessing and energy and resilience in the midst of difficulty. We know. We have hope that the kingdom of God is coming, and the days that I am discouraged, you sit in a funk for a little bit, and then you go, I don't really know what else to do besides get up and keep trying, and I'm not willing to quit. That just doesn't seem like that's ever the right plan. So, being in peacemaking, thank you for that. Andrew, great to have you here. Hope your conference goes very well.
Thank you so much for having me.